Today, we will talk about transformations. Specifically, we want to talk about translation, which just means you take a graph of the function and move it up, down, left, or right. So let me give a random function. And right now, let's talk about a generic function. And the one that you guys are used to seeing is f of x. It's pretty easy to know if you have a translation. If you see it's adding or subtracting a number, then you know you have a translation. So the location of the adding and subtracting is very, very important. For example, if you are adding to x, which is inside the parentheses, that's important. If you're inside the parentheses, it means you have a horizontal transformation. Inside parentheses, you have a horizontal change. Now, not only that, if you're inside the parentheses, you have to think of the opposite. The opposite will happen. For example, if you're adding on a number line and you see a plus sign, a positive number, you're thinking you have to go to the right because on a number line, plus is on the right side. However, you have to think of the opposite. So, for example, adding, you think go to the right, but actually this means go left. The amount of whatever A is. So once again, if you're inside the parentheses, it's a horizontal change, which means left or right. And you have to think of the opposite. Adding typically means right, but actually go to the left, the opposite. So if you see a subtraction inside the parentheses, once again, inside the parentheses is a horizontal change, left or right. And when you see a minus sign, you're thinking on a number line, the negatives are to the left. However, you have to think of the opposite. Instead of going left, it actually means go right. A. Whatever A is. And A can be a fraction, a whole number, a decimal, it does not matter. So, if you want a more specific function, for example, square root. It's actually square root of x minus a. As you can see, the subtracting a, we're trying to subtract a from x. And x then is being affected by the subtraction. So this is inside the parentheses. I know you don't see a parentheses, but it's understood that anything inside the square root is inside the parentheses. So we gotta follow the same rules that we've talked about before. If you're inside the parentheses, it's a horizontal change. Therefore, this is about left and right. And you guys can think about the opposite will happen. So for example, you see a minus a. A minus a actually does mean go to the right. So if you want a more specific example than that, we can say x minus 3, which means go right 3 units. And that's how you know you have a left and right for a translation. Now, if you want to know if you're going to go up and down, you're still going to add and subtract. but this time the adding and subtracting is not happening inside the parentheses, it will happen outside. So as an example, a generic one would be f of x, and then you add a. As you can see, the plus a is not inside the parentheses anymore. It is happening outside the parentheses. And when you're outside the parentheses, it's not horizontal, it is going to be a vertical change. So it's going to be about up or down if you're outside the parentheses. All right. Not only that, it's more straightforward. You don't have to think of the opposite anymore. It's straightforward. If it's plus, just like on a number line, a positive is up and a negative is down. Since that is plus, that means you go up. It means the function f of x will move up, shift up a units, whatever a is. And since we're subtracting a outside the parentheses, once again, it's some sort of vertical change, which means up or down, and this means down a. Now you can combine all of these together, but let me give you a more specific example than this generic function right here. So let's say I gave you x cubed. F of x is x cubed. Now for x cubed, let me move it up by adding some number. If I change f of x equals x cubed to x cubed plus 5, you can see the plus 5 is outside the parentheses. Now, it's hard to tell where the parentheses is, but you should know the parentheses right here, around x. Only x is being cubed. The plus 5 is not. So plus 5 is outside the parentheses. And if you remember, outside means it's a vertical change. So that means you move up 5. It is straightforward. And if I put x cubed minus 5, that means down 5, because once again, that is happening outside. It is straightforward. So what's it look like if it's horizontal? Well then, I have to make sure I'm not just cubing x. As you can see, this plus 5 is affecting x, and which is also being cubed. Plus 5 is affecting x now, unlike earlier, the plus 5 is not affecting x, it's affecting x cubed. This time, the plus 5 only affects x, which is inside the parentheses. And earlier we said if it's inside, it's either left or right. And the plus 5, normally thinking right side of the number line, but actually it does the opposite because you're inside the parentheses. So it actually means left 5. And this minus 5, which affects the x once more, actually means go to the right because you do the opposite. And you can put them all together to create a fancier one. X plus 3 cubed minus 4. And this is only affecting the x. And it's also inside the parentheses. So that means it's about left and right. So that actually means left, because we gotta do the opposite. And this right here is outside, so it's a vertical change, up or down, and it is straightforward. Down 4. This works for any kind of function. And here's another example of the square root that is inside the parentheses. And that plus 5 is outside the parentheses because the parentheses by default will be anything inside the square root. And that is it. Next time we'll talk about transformations, but about vertical stretch and shrink, and horizontal stretch and shrink, about dilation.